So we're going to go over a little bit of the team structure because there's multiple teams. I don't think a lot of people know that. At least the people that have joined over the last 6 months or so probably aren't aware that the DevOps organization is broken into smaller entities. So we're going to go through some of that stuff. If anybody has a fancy slogan that they want me to update on there, we could do that. So quick table of contents. We'll just go, again, I said go over the team structure. We have an engineering enablement group, middleware engineering, and cloud engineering. There's so many topics. This could have been a 6-hour presentation. So we're going to probably focus on the stuff that I think has been the most questioned or comes up the most is our current pipelines, our next gen pipelines. And then like there's some things that you could do on your first day at Nextiva that would set you up for not to speed you up on getting access to servers and access to Jenkins and everything like that. We'll talk about those, how to engage with DevOps and kind of when, and then we'll go into a full-blown question and answer, like always. One of the things that I bring up on all of these presentations is DevOps culture versus a DevOps team. And I pulled this off of Amazon's site. It's very similar on a lot of different places. Is DevOps is a combination of cultural philosophies, practice, and tools that increase an organization's ability to deliver applications and services at high velocity. Blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of other stuff in there. I think that's something that we should keep in mind as a company always, at least this organization. We do call ourselves the DevOps team, but in practice, we're trying to enable DevOps pretty much, not necessarily be DevOps, but enable DevOps as an organization. DevOps at Nextiva's goal is to create tooling to increase the organization's ability to deliver applications and services at high velocity. So kind of level setting there of this industry's gone crazy when it comes to what DevOps means. When I first heard of it, gosh, almost 10 years ago now, maybe 8 years ago, it was 100% culture driven. It was engineers getting their hands dirty on the infrastructure side and writing repeatable automation to make things repeatable and consistent and reliable. It was a mindset thing versus a team doing work for, I don't know. I should have put the thing on here, but when I first was learning about it, all we talked about was silos. We talked about the dev silo and we talked about the operations silo. And to bridge those silos together was to have both those teams work coherently together. And instead, our industry as a whole, and this isn't a Nextiva issue, this, in my opinion, is a software development, software engineering, whatever industry problem, we've decided to add a separate potential silo, and we have to do our best to prevent that by communicating both directions. Just a soapbox I could get on for probably the next 2 weeks talking nonstop about that. So we'll move on. So the team structure is, there's 3 major components to our DevOps organization. Engineering enablement. Today, Kyle Gangler is the manager for that team. We have middleware engineering, and then we have cloud engineering. As of right now, those 2 teams still directly report to me. And then breaking this down, Kyle has Eder and Axel. We do have 2 contractors right now that are helping us out with pipelines. I could have been a better manager and added their names there, but I didn't. Engineering enablement. So what's the primary focus of that smaller group is really the things to speed up the engineering teams. So they take care of our access requests. They take care of supporting pipelines, designing and developing pipelines, Nexus management, Jenkins management, Bitbucket troubleshooting. That is tough to say. That's a tongue twister. And a lot more. So I just wanted to kind of start this off with some high level things, and we'll get into some of the meat and potatoes. And then here's our middleware engineering team. I'll try to slow down a little bit. Theo, Greg, and Mark, they make up that team. I still don't feel like we're fully staffed on this team. We have an opening in Guadalajara for another DBA to help Theo out with Mongo. Had a good interview yesterday. We'll see how that goes. But this team focuses on Rabbit, Nginx, Redis, Kafka, Zookeeper, Postgres, Mongo, and Elk has been a big focus right now. And I'm sure I forgot a few things. Moving on. to our depleted cloud engineering team. Right now, it is just Brett and Devin and myself. Try to help out a little bit. Primary focus right now is the Nextiva private cloud initiative. It's starting to pick up some steam, and the next time you see me on something like this will probably be the main focus and topic is what that means to you guys. So that's something that we're not going to really touch on in this presentation, but that is definitely going to have to be a follow-up because that's coming hopefully pretty quickly. A big, not necessarily by design, but as of necessity and just because of the nature of who the individuals are, a lot of supporting the ME team and the EE team on things that they either haven't seen yet or just need an extra set of eyes falls on Devin and Brett a lot, and Kyle. They still, and myself, we still tend to have to help out with a lot of issues, and keeps the three teams really working together as our more senior, seasoned DevOps guys. They get pulled into a lot. And then VM provisioning, when we get VMs handed over from infrastructure, we have some Ansible roles that we put things on top of it, like installing a lot of the users that our automation needs, and as well as some of the features like the Java version, or we've been installing Docker for the new Go projects and things like that. So now let's kind of talk about, we've had a lot of people join the company in the last few months, and everybody knows we have a huge initiative of the Nextiva Connect, which really opened back up the way we're using pipelines today and the way we automate things and the process we take from service is an idea to services in production and the pain points that are in there. So a little bit of history on our current, what we call Nextiva pipelines. The Nextiva first gen pipelines was a one size fits all pipeline that was rolled out. It was 2018 when this was first used. So they're getting kind of old now when it comes to our industry. Since then, a lot's changed in Nextiva. As the company and the product grew, it became very clear that a one-size-fits-all model does not scale with Nextiva. To not go into too many details on that, I think some of the reasons will be explained in when we talk about the new pipelines in a second. So today, right now, we can support Java applications and libraries in this one-size-fits-all model, Python applications and Python libraries. And the same thing with JS. I guess I don't know if they're called libraries in JS, but modules. And then Ansible deploys. And then we do have Kubernetes deploys, but they are specific today to an in-house tool called KubeUp that does deployments to Kubernetes and relies on a non-Kubernetes standard model to get applications into Kubernetes. That obviously is not flexible. So kind of a funny slide here. Current pipelines does not support Go, PHP, Ruby, C++, or assembly. So if you're thinking about writing an application in any of those languages, you're going to have to, at this time, come up with your own Jenkins pipeline. So if you're new to the company and you're told, hey, we have these fancy pipeline things, this is where I'm going to need help to make sure my screen's still sharing. Where do I go? What do I do to find those? So let's do this, and let's come on over here. So the screen's still sharing?
Yeah.
Anybody?
It is.
Perfect. Okay. So we have this space inside our space that has unpublished changes. Interesting. The CI/CD space is, or subsection of the DevOps Confluence pages is what you'd want to start. And there is a good amount of information on here. And actually, this is something I didn't add. Let's just open that, in another tab so we could take a peek at that in a second. Kyle's done a really good job at documenting what's coming up in the roadmap for the engineering enablement team. But the big pieces are, and I need to change these names I noticed today. Matt Welter did an effort to change the names of some of our jobs that were kind of confusing, because originally when we called something a release start and release finish, it sounded like it was actually doing the release itself, when in reality, it's just creating branches and merging branches. And then the good fancy page here really breaks down the multi-branch pipeline usages and explains what happens for each branch type. So a branch name that is PR hyphen wildcard, it'll check out, it'll merge, it'll do unit tests, and it'll notify the team. And so for in this page, you can go look at it later. I'm not going to go completely into it because I want to leave a good amount of time for Q&A. But features do certain things. Develop branch does certain things. Develop could be named dev as well. There's a way in the pipeline to tell it that. And then releases, hotfix, so on. And then it kind of breaks down later on what happens in each step, in each phase. So that documentation is absolutely there to take a peek at it. There's some frequently asked questions that we could have done better at populating this over the years. We will do better with the new pipelines, and then some known authentication issues and the release procedure step by step. This is specific to our library. One of the things that we kind of did a poor job advertising is that this library is Nextiva's library. It's not DevOps's library. And in saying that is, at any given time, anyone could have come in here and made a pull request, added a feature. What you will find when you do that is it was overcomplicated and it's confusing, and it takes way more time to add a tiny feature than you would have thought, especially if you're a Java developer that's going to jump into some Groovy code that should be pretty simple and straightforward. The farther you get into it, you're going to realize why we're wanting to start over. But that being said, there are a lot of good examples and good documentation in the repo itself. Like this, do I have another tab with this? This documentation, this Jenkins file docs file, we did a good job of breaking down all of the options that you could add when you start a pipeline with the job templates class, or I forget the technical term for that. Excuse me.
Hey, Chris, we have a question on the chat. Are you able to see it, or?
No, I stopped sharing when I did that last time. So if you don't mind reading it.
Yeah, of course not. It says, does Java Leaves pipelines mean JVM hosted langs or strictly Java?
Say that again.
Does Java Leaves pipelines mean JVM hosted langs or strictly Java?
Oh, no, it's just Java. Just Java. Anything that can build with Maven, technically. Yeah, and so calling it a Java, well, no, it would be Java specific because it would be Java specific. So yeah, it's not JVM languages, it would be Java. Yeah. Kyle can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm accurate on that.
Yeah, he just jumped.
Yeah. Did he jump in? Okay, perfect. This file does, so you can see we did kind of the Java doc style here where we explained what the property was and what the overrides would do. So if this example is Ansible deploy, yes, it's true. We want to do an Ansible deploy, or as our deploy a K8 deploy would be true. By default, it's false. So you would want to flip those unless you're doing both, which you probably aren't. But there's a ton of things in here, and it shows you how to use, if you are using Ansible and you need extra variables for your deploy specific to environments, you can then do that in this way. And then your Ansible environment map you can override. And so a lot of these things, when you first look at it, you're kind of like, well, what does that mean to me? I have no idea. What do you mean? Like, why would I care about this? When you would start figuring that out is when you would start coming into some of these actual use cases. And you can see in here, we have app name, Java app. And this, actually ties into your name in your pipeline in Jenkins as well. And you can see in here, we're just defining this is an application that is going to do a Kubernetes deploy because it has deploy to Kubernetes or K8s as true. Yes, we need to publish a Docker image for that. And then we had this beautiful sales demo environment at one time that we were deploying to. And then this instance, they decided we don't need our artifact deployed to Nexus, so we set this as false. You probably do need that if you're creating a client library as well. So but it gave you that flexibility. Let's go back to the presentation because I'm getting a little sidetracked. But yeah, so in the pipelines library in Git, or the pipelines Git repo, there are a lot of examples for you. This line here is an inside joke for the DevOps team. The first generation pipelines are self-documented. They're not. There's also for Java applications, because the majority of them are, there's this pretty well-known interim solution for new Spring Boot applications. Interim should have probably not been put into that page because we thought it was going to be a lot shorter. But that page gives you a very in detailed walkthrough of how to create a pipeline once you already have, like it actually even's like, here, this is how you submit a VM ticket. Here's how you create your pull request to get your Ansible deploy working. It walks you through that entire process. Unfortunately, it was specific to Spring Boot applications because at the time that was a primary focus of the company. What is this page that I can't click on? Come on, browser. I don't know. I have the little chime thing in the way, so I can't click on that tab. Let's go in here. Let's go to the next slide. Maybe that'll help me out. Oh, again, this is an example. Let's skip through that. We don't really care. One of the things that I think, if I was starting here fresh as on a dev team, this is a search query that I would like to know about. I'm told we have these pipelines things, and I hear that there's a job template that a lot of the applications use. It's pretty easy to go into Bitbucket and just search for job template. I did this earlier, so I know if I jump to about the third page of results, I'll get some good ones. So if we just come in here and we say, oh, let's go to the fourth page. Why not? File upload. Let's go to its Jenkins file, and I can kind of see some of the things that they were doing. This happens to be a JavaScript project, so it's different than ones we were looking at earlier. So this is a good use case. I can see in the project flow, we're setting the language to JS. The distribution path is dev, and the test commands are overwritten in here. So each of these applications can have their own test commands, and they can have their own build commands. And I can see that as an example really quick. And I can go back to the search results, and I can go find another one. Probably won't be able to find a JS one off the top of my head because I'm not that familiar with our products anymore. This is probably not one. But this is another Java one, and this is about as basic as it gets here. You can see this one is a client. So they have the Ansible deploy is false. That means it will publish the artifact to Nexus for other applications to then use as a dependency. And this is as simple as a pipeline as you can get here. It's just saying the language is Java, the test commands are Maven clean install, and we're doing some check style stuff. And anyone who's authenticated in Jenkins can trigger these builds. But unfortunately, that only works for the languages that we support today. How do I get, I guess we're staying this way. So that kind of covers what the existing pipelines are and where you can find the documentation. That CI/CD space on Confluence is your best friend when it comes to that prior to reaching out to the DevOps team. So that leads us to what Kyle and team are working on today. Gosh, this started probably, I do everything, all the math in my head on remembering whether we're in the office or not. And this was probably 6 months before we went remote. So about a year and a half ago, Devin started working on a next generation of pipelines and found this modular library that allows you to write pretty much each stage as an overwritable module. And so that's what we're going to talk about next. And the goals are going to be breaking up existing pipelines into functionality, or pipelines functionality into modular pieces that you can use to create a more tailored workflow. And we'll show an example of that in a few of the way we used it in the past, and they're going to try to make it better. I should have got throat lozenges. So what's MPL? It's a module pipeline library. The Grid Dynamics group is who wrote it. So we're using it as a base library and building on top of it to meet the needs of Nextiva. Provides core to support flexible modular structure, enables support for declarative and scripted pipelines, ensure that nested libraries could reuse the features, allow overrides from projects or nested libraries, prepare a set of simple and minimal basic pipelines, make it easy to create modules and pipelines. So one of the things that we did when I was talking about 16, 18 months ago was we made a very basic pipeline with this and used it for today. We publish our base Docker images nightly. And we use these pipelines for that and have for a very long time. So when we look at these pipelines, they're a little different. But they're simple, and we're going to try to keep making them more and more simple for us to where we define as little as possible in the project Jenkins file, especially when you're using the default functionality. So this one's a very simple example. The only build, or the only step that we really cared about for this was the Docker build process. And in here you can see we're just defining the image's name and what registry it goes to, and which credentials in Jenkins it goes to. So something like this line number 9 probably should be abstracted out into the module long-term and not included into your Jenkins file. So those are the things we'll be rinsing and repeating. If you want to overwrite it, you could, but it should use the default one. And here you can see we also do security scannings with Tenable. So we had to have a secondary step to do that security scan. So that's fine. That could be rinse and repeat. If I was just making a Docker image, perfect. This will work all the time. Then we take a peek at our Python base images. So we could have done a couple different approaches. We could have made a Git repo for every single version of Python, or we could have had all our Docker files into one repo, which is what we decided. Excuse me. So what we did in this approach was we still wanted to use the modular pipelines, but we wanted to override the build process to be able to do multiple Docker builds. And so instead of making a pull request into the pipeline repo, you go into the same project. So let's actually go to the root of the project. There's a .jenkins modules build file in here, build.groovy. And what that does is I customized exactly what I wanted the build step to be for this pipeline. And so that doesn't sound too powerful when you only have one step and you're overriding the only step. But you could imagine if in this Docker file or this Jenkins file, you had modules build, you had modules publish, you had modules deploy, module maybe integration tests, module, I don't know, anything you could think of. But the only one we wanted to override was the build one. And we wanted to use the base libraries of all those other modules. That's where the power of this can come into play. And then over here in this repo, we then wrote our own custom code to just loop through. We do like a for each on all the files and tags and do multiple builds, multiple pushes to Docker. And then the idea with that is if 5, 6, 3 teams are overriding in a very similar way, we would want to know about that and potentially add this as a specific module in the library so then we could then pull it out of the app code and put it into the library long-term for more people to use. And I think that's where we're going to potentially see a good cross-pollination, I guess you would say, of the engineering enablement team and the engineering teams working together on this long-term once we get the first phase of it released. Oh, excuse me. That might be a good place to ask some questions and let my throat rest a little bit if we have any questions right now.
Any questions, team? Remember that you can drop those on the chat and Chris will help us answering. No, we don't have anything yet.
That's fine. We'll keep going. So that's it's a lot of information. And again, this will probably be something that we'll go into a deeper dive of too when Kyle's and team gets this closer to release. But that kind of shows you the mindset change that we're making with pipelines, where we have this one size fits all. It had a good amount of things you could override, but it wasn't flexible enough. If you wanted to just change the entire build step, you couldn't, or the deploy step, you couldn't. Like today, if this was done and we decided that we needed to do some, I don't know, let's just use a random language like C#, and we could quickly potentially add those new modules to support C# and still use, that might not be a good example, but yeah, you get what I'm saying. This, I think, is probably the best slide on here, or section of the slide. You start at Nextiva and you're a software engineer and you hear that you're going to need SSH access, you're going to need Jenkins access, you're going to need all of these things. We've done a good job of moving a lot to Okta. Unfortunately, there's some stragglers and some tech debt that we're trying to get through to get all of that into Okta, so it's just taken care of for you. We're not there yet, and that's why this is still a thing. And so there's some guides out there that probably could have been moved to the DevOps space or copied and pasted. I think Matt Welter started this access request page, and I've updated it over the years. But there is this access request page in Confluence that walks you through how to get your SSH key into the Ansible repo that we use to push those users out to grant you access to servers. This is one of the first things that I would recommend having new team members do until we get our new solution, which we're not going to talk about today. This is going to be the process until otherwise announced. So that is a prerequisite to creating a DevOps ticket asking for access. There's primarily 4 big items that aren't in Okta today, and that would be Jenkins, Nexus, SonarQube, and Splunk. Kubernetes is one of them that I didn't add that also uses LDAP. And so we get a lot of tickets that are Jenkins access tickets, or I need Splunk access tickets. When you work on the dev teams or the engineering teams, we have, what we do when we get these requests is we go into LDAP and we use a template that by default gives you access to these 4 things. So if you don't have an LDAP user yet and you submit a Jenkins ticket, by default, you're going to get access to the other things. So, or I guess in a roundabout way, I'm saying, just put a ticket in asking for LDAP access. We know what that means. We know what that'll give you. And then you know at the end of the day that you're going to have access to Nexus, Jenkins, SonarQube, and Splunk. Our service desk link is in the description of the Slack channel, DevOps. I can't think of anything else other than going through potentially those documents and looking at example pipelines would be other things, but there's a lot that you're going to do on your first day. I would say this is your first day of exploring what you need from the DevOps team. And then how to engage with DevOps. And this has been somewhat of a interesting topic for me because our job is to support the engineering team. But then, like we showed at the beginning, we have 3 teams that are working on separate initiatives. And so sometimes when there's tickets that come in that could have been answered by a team member or a manager, it's always a little like, oh, we got pulled away. But so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And there's something that we also haven't done a good job advertising is I'm getting way ahead of myself. Okay, so what you need help from DevOps. What I would prefer is if you would ask some teammates about the issue, is there a known way to solve it? Check with your manager, the same thing. One of the big things that I would really like people to do is try to avoid creating an individual DevOps counterpart or partner. I want to build these relationships with everyone so that the teams actually don't feel like separate teams. So that sounds counterproductive to say, don't reach out directly to someone in DevOps. But the main reason why I say that is, if let's use Kyle as an example, if you constantly go to Kyle every time you have a question and Kyle's not around that day, or Kyle's deep into a project, he might not be able to respond right away. Where if you aren't sure if you need to submit a ticket and you have a question for the overall group, or Kyle's out that day, just asking it in the channel, and more likely than not, there's going to be someone in the organization that's going to be able to answer that question. And I think that's what I'm trying to get across with this. Is there's been a lot of examples where someone will ask, in a positive way, someone will ask a question in the DevOps Slack room, and then someone on a totally different engineering team will answer the question for them. And it's just a way to collaborate, instead of just saying, hey, Kyle, or hey, Devin, or hey, Brett, I need help with this. And they might not even be able to respond. I personally think if you need things answered quicker, you're going to get them through the actual DevOps channel versus individually messaging us. And then when all else fails, yeah, absolutely put a DevOps ticket. We try to do our best to hit those SLAs that we've set up. Most tickets are like I think an 8-hour SLA or 16-hour SLA, and then some of them are longer because they're like VM tickets. We are currently working on adding a feature or a way to get critical issues to us that tell us, hey, this has to be worked on right away. We'll roll that out with some communication. That wasn't complete by the time I made this slide. So DevOps support tickets should be for supporting existing tooling, not adding features or creating new tooling. That should go through through myself or Kyle, and we should get those planned out as project work. An example of that, and excuse me, what I've been doing is, if you've created a ticket and you've seen it move to a different project, it's because I've seen that DevOps ticket and said, there's no way this is going to happen within the SLA. This isn't actually a support ticket. This is actually a project or an effort that we have to do. So I'll move it to the correct project, which I don't really have a problem doing that, but it would be better if we communicated about, hey, let's pick on the Go language because it's been a hot topic. We're starting these Go projects. Let's get it in our roadmap so we know that we need those Go pipelines by X amount of date. That would go in the engineering enablement project, and it would be prioritized in their backlog, not necessarily a DevOps support ticket. Just like any feature that comes from product goes to engineering, it would have to go through that pipeline or that roadmap and then be determined on when it's going to be worked on. This is going to become very commonplace, I think, in the next 6 months or so, when we get to the private cloud and the engineering team's like, hey, I want this feature that AWS has, but it would be nice if we had it in the private cloud. That wouldn't be a DevOps support ticket. That would be a cloud engineering initiative. So that's kind of where that is. So could have gone into a lot other things, but I wanted to narrow it down into that and have a good Q&A session if possible, which could lead into larger topics as well. So continuous delivery pipeline steps. Do we support automated deploys to cloud environments? What's our deployment strategy that we're supporting? That's a very large question. No, we do not support deployments to cloud environments. The only cloud environment that we deploy to today is AWS, and we're in the process of getting rid of that with the new private cloud. And we do not have, there's a process, Kyle might be able to speak to this later on. There was talk about canary deploys and blue-green deploys in Kubernetes. The way they were talking about solving that was with Helm charts, but not necessarily an actual, let's do that, actual pipelines themselves. But that's a great example of something that would be a feature for engineering enablement and not a DevOps support ticket. Oh, Kyle, I did answer that question. Good. All right.
Yay, we have another one.
Oh, do we want to talk about that? So yeah, that's fair to give you guys some insight on what happened with that. So we had a tooling cluster in AWS that was 100% dependent on HashiCorp vaults that was deployed on top of it. We do patching of AWS. We were a little behind, and we got up to patching tooling, and when it deployed, so the way we do that in AWS is we create new AMIs and we do a rolling upgrade of those AMIs. So there's 3 master servers. It'll replace one at a time with the new AMI, do all the Kubernetes deploys on top of it, and it should join the cluster and be fine. Dev and QA was 100% fine. It worked perfect. In tooling, something happened that caused Vault to be offline, or one of the webhooks to be unavailable, and master became unhealthy. My throat's getting dry. Give me just a second. So that quickly put us in a state of a cluster that has all of our Jenkins on-demand agents, our non-production Spring Cloud Config server, our some other things, a Rabbit cluster that was used, unfortunately, in production. Our Vault server was all on this cluster and had a dependency of itself. It crashed. We could not get it back up without Vault being up, without some other things. We actually tried to spin up an entire new cluster to move these things, and we were just running into a lot of issues. So we sped up a couple of the efforts that we wanted to do in the next few months, meaning moving Vault out of Kubernetes. We don't want our secrets engine inside Kubernetes. We don't want that as a dependency. We want it to be a self-contained thing that is highly available, has its own security rules, everything, blah, 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 blah. We had to move Spring Cloud Config. We moved a Rabbit server. And then Kyle actually, luckily, was in the process of updating our Jenkins on-demand slaves to use a Docker swarm instead of Kubernetes. So we've kind of removed our dependency, or we're working on removing our dependency of Jenkins and Kubernetes. Personally, I don't think we should have a dependency of Kubernetes to run Jenkins. I think it should be a and/or type of, not an and/or, but it should be or type of a thing. Jenkins pipelines and Python versions. That feels like an incomplete sentence. Lonnie, where's the private cloud hosted? The ACI environments. The first site that'll go live is Los Angeles.
You should touch on like creating new repositories and the jobs available. I posted it in general, and it like shocked a lot of people like last week.
Yes, actually, that is a slide I meant to add. Let's start sharing again. There was actually a ticket, I think, yesterday. Matt, who creates the repos today?
Anyone? Oh, repos in I think it's still like who has admin. So you typically manager, some tech leads might.
Okay. Is my screen showing again?
It's not. Oh, wait, here it comes. Yes, it is.
I'm not on VPN. Give me just a second. So we started an initiative that never got finished because the teams kind of split up, and then now they're back together. But anyways, that's a long drama story. The spirit of the project was to, I always forget the name of it. I know how to find it though. The spirit of the project was going to be go to a UI, type in some information. It'll create you a Jenkins ticket. It'll create you a Bitbucket repo, and it'll create all of your needed Jenkins jobs. And potentially it could have gone as far as creating your skeleton for your Java project, your Python project, and your projects. But this job here was one of the first steps, and it was not intended to be like a user input thing. It was intended for a application to call the Jenkins endpoint, but it's worked really good. You can come in here and put in your repository URL, your application name, and all the things that you see in here, and it will then create your multi-branch pipeline, forgive me for not remembering the new names, but the release create, the release finish, the hotfix, and create and finish, or create and merge, I think is what we called them now. But that works really well. And the super exciting part of this to me is this is also backed by a Git repo. And this will be how, when we move to a new Jenkins, we're going to have as many as possible of our Jenkins jobs use this functionality. Since this is backed by a Git repo, if we lost all of those jobs, all we have to do is run this job, and it'll recreate all of those repositories, or not repositories, the Jenkins jobs. And one of the cool things that we did, probably a year ago, is we changed the name of the release start and release finish to release create and release merge. And we did that in the code of this DSL library, and then we just triggered this, and it automatically went in and made those jobs and updated all the existing ones that used this project. So today you go to a meeting, they're like, hey, we need the MacBook Pro orchestration service or something like that. You go create your MacBook Pro orchestration service repo. You can come in here after that repo is created and run this, and all your Jenkins jobs that you need for that. For version 1 of pipelines would exist. You still have to make your Jenkins file. You still have to set up your Ansible variables and playbook and all of that. But it gets you one step closer without having to rely on DevOps or a manager that has access to creating jobs in Jenkins. And then they're consistent across the board, across teams and everything. Good call, Matt.
Chris, can you actually go to search and put like Nextiva -connect? Spa? Get it to actually show the drop down. Hit back, delete, and then A.
No, I got you.
This is just to give every idea, like these are the jobs that should be built by default for put SPA in there too. Otherwise you get the UI in there.
I see what you're doing.
Trying to get it. Connect SPA.
It's not wanting to.
Connect first. Nextiva connect.
Oh, okay. Silly.
Okay,
there we go.
Those jobs are the ones that get created out of from this. So you get your security job as well. That's uploading to like Veracode asynchronously from the other pipeline, so it's not blocking. And so if you actually see these jobs created for older projects that are still like release start, release finish, that means all they did was like just copy and paste configurations within Jenkins. It's not actually controlled by like the Git backing repo. So to Chris's point, like I did this effort with like my teams, honestly, when this became a thing, over a year ago. I do suggest that other teams, work to get their applications into the Git repo. And you could actually just do a bulk import of like, if you just go out to the Git repo and just do like YAML pull requests for all your projects, like we can just re-kick off the Jenkins. You don't have to actually go through the interface. That's just like a friendly way to do it.
With the caveat that there are some validations going on to create the accurate YAML, but yes.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll take
a one.
Yeah. Because breaking one of the YAMLs can make this job very upset. But yes, I encourage that as well. And we could even get to the point where we can utilize this to migrate. Like that's a big thing, but we could utilize this to migrate to a different Jenkins or a different style of pipelines, because all of these jobs have a consistent job configuration. If we made a major change to pipelines and we had to change the way the jobs were configured, we'd have to go into every single Jenkins job. I think anybody who has gone to our Jenkins sees how overwhelming that would be. But if in this style, we just go change this project that's creating those configurations, run it, and it'll do it to all of them that are controlled by the Git repo.
Any other questions, team? Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you for putting this super quickly. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.